It is an honor for me to introduce Judith Hauptman, our first speaker in this panel. I apologize that I don't have a sense of humor in Hebrew. I do in English, but I will be speaking in Hebrew today. The title of this session indicates that we are here to clarify how we can reduce the gap between the Jews in Israel and the Jews in the United States on Halakhic issues like conversion, women prayers, and egalitarian prayers at the Kotel. I believe that the gap between these two populations is growing, is growing, not because they interpret halacha in different ways, but rather because in Israel, politics intervenes in religion. There is no doubt that Orthodox rabbis in the United States follow all of the halachic requirements when they take responsibility for conversion. So it is clear that the halacha allows women to wear a talit while they pray and to read the Torah for other women. Therefore, preventing women from praying as they see fit at the Kotel and rejecting conversions of people who are converted in the United States under the auspices of Orthodox rabbis in the United States are not for religious reasons, but rather for political reasons. In the United States, there is a complete separation between church and state. The first amendment of the American Constitution is that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This sentence is the legal basis for individuals of different religions to live together peacefully in a democratic state. This amendment allows every religion to function according to its own rules and to appoint leaders as it sees fit. This amendment also allows different denominations of a certain religion to flourish and also to compete with one another for followers. Religious freedom is one of the basic principles of a democratic society. In Israel, the incorporation of religion and state allows one denomination in Judaism to force its opinions and rulings on the others. We're not talking about policies at a synagogue in which each denomination can, of course, follow its own customs. We are talking about marriage and divorce and conversion and prayer in public spaces. These are issues that relate to the daily lives of most of the community. The conservative and reform movements do not have political parties. Therefore, the rabbis of these movements cannot participate in government discussions on religious issues. The ultra-Orthodox movements have political parties. After the elections, when the coalition is formed, there's almost always a need to include a religious faction, generally an ultra-Orthodox one. As a result, the ultra-Orthodox rabbis who have extreme halachic opinions are those that make the decisions on all halachic issues in the state of Israel. In my opinion, from the religious perspective, this is not democracy, it is theocracy. For this reason, the Jews in the United States look at the changes to halacha in Israel in a very negative way. Even if we weren't talking about integration of politics and religion, the fact that the ultra-Orthodox parties and rabbis have extreme opinions that are different from those of the other denominations. The ultra-Orthodox rabbis do not acknowledge the fact that halacha develops over time, and they are not aware of the fact that Talmud itself acknowledges this process and also approves it. For several years, I have been studying anecdotes in the Talmud Bavli, in the Babylonian Talmud, specifically the sections that talk about how one sage or another practices halacha, implements halacha. After reviewing several hundreds of anecdotes, I reached a very unexpected conclusion, and that was that the sage that implements the halacha often makes changes. This is why the editors of the Talmud saw it necessary to include these stories. large number of anecdotes show readers that halakha is defined within the Beit Midrash, but when it's taken outside and encounters life circumstances, it changes. The objective of these anecdotes is not to praise not to praise the sages, but rather to draw our attention to the changes that are incorporated. I will present two examples of this phenomenon. The prohibition against medical treatment on Shabbat appears in the Mishnah. In Shabbat, it says that it's forbidden to take medication on Shabbat if it is not food or drink. The Christian sources report that the Jews were critical of Jesus for healing a paralyzed hand on Shabbat. One of the sections in the Gemara talks about this prohibition and tells about a first-generation Amorah, a sage from the Talmud, talked about how it is permitted to treat an eye on Shabbat, even though this is a type of medication. Later on, Rabbi Yehuda, this rabbi student, ruled that it is permitted to perform this type of medical treatment on Shabbat. His colleague, Rabbi Bar Shmuel, objected and said that this was a violation of Shabbat. He used very harsh words. This discussion ends with an anecdote. A maidservant who worked in the home of Shmuel, who was also one of these first-generation Amoraim sages, she suffered from severe pain in her eye. She yelled, but no one paid any attention, meaning that no one suggested any type of medical treatment because in Shmuel's home, these actions were prohibited on Shabbat. Without any medical treatment, her eye exploded, in quotation, quote unquote, meaning that irreversible severe harm was caused. The next day, Shmuel went to the Beit Midrash and announced that in such a case it is permitted to treat the eye on Shabbat, and that is the halakha. Through this anecdote, we learn that it is permitted to change a halakha even many years after it is accepted. There are many examples of this kind, but this example is especially impressive because the cause of the change is not even a Jew, not a male, not free, and not a great woman, but rather a young maid, a woman of the lowest possible social standing. However, the loss of her eye touched the heart of Shmuel, and for humanitarian reasons, he changed halakha. A second example, Mishnah Chet in Gittin, talks about how a forced get in Israel is allowed, meaning that if a Jewish judge forces a husband to give his wife a divorce, the divorce is accepted. After the Gemara explains the Mishnah, it tells about Rabbi Yosef, who used to sit apparently in a public place, and he would force husbands to divorce their wives. It seemed that in those cases, the woman wanted a divorce, but the husband insisted on not giving her a divorce, on not freeing her. So Rabbi Yosef came and helped women be redeemed from their husbands. We might even say that he was one of the first feminist rabbis. Abaye, his student, saw him forcing men to divorce their wives and criticized him. He said, how can you allow yourself to act this way? We are in Bavel. We are simple rabbis. And Rabbi Tarfon learned from the verse, these are the laws that you will place before them, that the meaning of the word before them means not before the simpler rabbis, meaning that simple rabbis like ourselves cannot make changes to divorce laws. Rabbi Yosef rejected this criticism and said that the judges of Bavel are the emissaries of the sages of Israel, which is why we are allowed to judge on domestic issues. It seems that he made up this was an innovative claim in response to his students' criticism. Of course, Abaye was not familiar with this principle, otherwise he never would have asked. This anecdote is also incredible and encouraging. These two sages agree that they do not have the authority to force a husband to divorce his wife, but Rav Yosef presented the new concept that the rabbis of Bavel function as representatives of the rabbis in Israel. As their emissaries, it is in fact the sages of Israel that are forcing the men in Bavel to divorce their wives. Thus, Rabbi Yosef is rejecting the words of Rabbi Tarfon and paving a new path, saying that the sages of Bavel have independence. This anecdote has contemporary importance, not only because of its favorable attitude towards women in distress, but also because of the relationship that it presents between the rabbis of Israel and the rabbis abroad. We can assume that until the time of Rabbi Yosef, the sages of Bavel were limited in their ability to serve as judges because the sages of Israel did not give them the authority. Rabbi Yosef did not ask permission from the sages of Israel. He took upon himself the authority to judge, and only in retrospect did he justify his courageous action. It is not surprising that in the Talmud Bavli there is no objection made by the rabbis of Israel. But today we face a similar problem. How can we improve the relations between the rabbis in Israel and the rabbis in the United States? As a resident of the U.S., I am in favor of the solution selected by Rabbi Yosef, in that the American rabbis see themselves as certified on behalf of the rabbis of Israel, and that the rabbis of Israel will give their confirmation for this arrangement. Of course, here in Israel, you have the right to choose the type of rule that you would like, even if it forces you to accept the authority of an extreme, ultra-Orthodox chief rabbinate that rules based on prejudice and not based on Halakhic considerations. But you have to consider the vast implications of this arrangement. I am proposing the possibility that what you do from the halachic perspective causes the Jews of the United States to become more and more indifferent to Israel. American Jewry has a very developed moral sense when it comes to halacha. It cannot tolerate injustice, especially when there is an option to correct that injustice, but it is not used. Most of the denominations in the United States, from Reform to the Orthodox inclusive, admit that the Talmudic attitude towards women is biased. They also acknowledge that it is possible to improve the status of women within the boundaries of halakha. In the seminars of the egalitarian movements, women learn rabbinical studies along with women. And in the ultra-Orthodox communities, women learn Gemara, and they are designated to serve as leaders of Orthodox communities, as community leaders or with other titles. There is no doubt that halakha allows women to teach these subjects and to teach Torah in public, but unfortunately that doesn't happen in Israel. Women learn Gemara, but they don't take the tests of the chief rabbinate. This is against halakha and against our moral principles. As I tried to explain today, the chief rabbinate is the one that does not correctly understand our wonderful texts. We, members of the egalitarian denominations, do understand them correctly. What's more, we explain in very great detail how we reach our halachic conclusions. The ultra-Orthodox rabbis in Israel, because of their political power, they close the door in our faces. As it says on the homepage of the Srugim website about women who signed up to take the rabbinate test on Nida, the registration was rejected without any explanation. To summarize, I consider myself fortunate to have witnessed as a young child in the United States, to have witnessed the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. I also consider myself fortunate for many years to be proud of the impressive achievements of the State of Israel in many ways, including economy, society, and Torah study. But alongside the joy, there's also sadness that this state does not address the justified requests of men and women on the religious level. I am concerned about the rigidity of the chief rabbinate and its negative impact on young Jews in the United States who are not as proud as I am of this miraculous state. If we don't want the younger generation in America to alienate Israel, we have to realize the incredible vision of Yeshayahu, and I quote, "I call you with justice, and I will hold your hands, and I will make you a covenant and a light among the nations." Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I am very sorry. I apologize. We had a decision to make in the Knesset. We had a very exciting discussion there at the Knesset. It's very complex to have a member of Knesset at this kind of discussion, so I'm very glad you invited me. What I'll try to do is give a historical perspective to the relations between Israel and the diaspora within this framework of church, of state and religion. I'll try to give you my perspective as a member of Knesset and activist. I think that the main challenge is that world Jewry has changed over the past 100 years on a nearly unprecedented scale. Judaism had two big communities in North Africa and in Europe. Today, the two main centers are in Israel and in the US. This happened over 100 years, maybe a little more than 100 years. Within these changes, other things changed. Obviously, the Holocaust and the establishment of the State of Israel were the main determinants of these changes. U.S. Jewry grew and strengthened. There are no special Jews in the U.S., special laws in the U.S. for Jews. What happened is that American Jewry, among all these changes, decided how American Jewry would look. Reform Judaism started in Germany, but very quickly emigrated to the U.S. The conservative movement grew up in the U.S. Here in Israel, we haven't yet molded our brand of Judaism. If you look at the past 70 years in Israel, everything is challenging. And the challenges always look insurmountable. We do manage in the end, but we tire ourselves out. The first generation has to establish the state, and there were the two big wars. We had to bolster our existence. Then there was the economic challenge, hyperinflation. We changed our currency. The 1985 economic change from economy based on agriculture to high-tech. Now, over the past 20 years, we're trying to close the gaps, social activism, social justice. Israel has to ask itself how we cope with the recent challenges. We've been doing that in the Knesset, but I won't go into that now. Currently, the challenge is Jewish identity. What is it for us here in Israel? How do we define ourselves as the state of the Jewish people? How do we put together visions of Jews from so many places all over the world? How do we mold it all into one peoplehood? I don't think we've been doing too well. It looks like a war, an all-out war. Like everything else, this seems like another insurmountable challenge. But I am optimistic. I do think it will be successful. What happens is that American Jewry has already undergone all this. Judaism has already been molded. So you look at us and say, well, come on, no, what's happening? And we say, well, we're just about to take care of that. Conversion, we don't know. We're just about to take care of that. The truth is, we truly don't know. We don't know what to do. The main story is that we really and truly do need some time to mold our self-identity, and that's exactly what we're doing now. The bad news is that it's going to take a lot of time. The good news is that we do see that Israel is about to define its Judaism. It began by eliminating the rift between secular and religious. We've looked at the Jewish bookshelf. We have all kinds of people who declare themselves Jews. Schechter Institute is doing a lot for Jewish renewal. The next step, as far as I'm concerned, is when we look at everything connected to state and religion, the solution will be, you can re-examine what I say now over the next few years, mikveh issues, kashrut, Shabbat, marriage, mikveh issues, kashrut, Shabbat, marriage, divorce, conversion, and burial. Why is burial last? Well, because nobody goes to the polls on that issue. Well, look, I know what I'm dealing with. I'm a politician. That is the order that I anticipate. I'm talking about Israeli Judaism. I'm not talking now about U.S. Jews. That's why I put the problems in that order. Kashrut, we just had a very important step of dismantling the rabbinate monopoly. When I spoke to people 5 or 7 years ago, before we had the private hashgacha, I went to the Zohar rabbis. I thought they would do it. It was fringe. Now it's mainstream. Shabbat is now the core issue at the heart of Judaism here in Israel. I think we will be able to give Shabbat a different image here. Marriage will be changing. Conversion comes next. This is so complex. Conversion is so complex. It is the most complex issue. The solution for conversion issue will have to be, I spoke about the 100 years and the dramatic change over the past 100 years. We will have to look for solutions. Some people are already doing that, and they precisely take that approach of looking at the past 1,000 years. For 2,000 years ago, we went into exile and we had to reinvent ourselves as Judaism without a country, without a land, without a national experience. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, during the time of the Mishnah and the Talmud, reinvented Judaism based on community. 10 Jews, that's a community, and they get organized like oil within a tsunami of 2,000 years of exile. We were drops of oil and we floated. Now we're back in our land and we don't want to relinquish those drops of oil. We still have our community. We're still community focused. We pretend to be drops of oil floating on a sea of oil, but here the drops of oil have to coalesce and define our Judaism. We don't need to be based on a specific community and stick together. We have to be much more focused on being the nation state of the Jewish people with all its complexities. That's what's missing. That's what we have to reinvent now. Panels of this kind, conferences of the kind we're holding here today are extremely instrumental in forging this identity. People often ask me, why don't you make decisions on the conversion issue? Politicians read this proposal and say it's a wonderful compromise, but by definition, if it's a compromise, both parties aren't happy. What is our thing? We need a compromise. There's nothing else we can do. It's not politically correct, but we're just buying time. As politicians, we need to forge the Israeli model of conversion. I answered you. I think I did answer you. It's a compromise, but it's not relevant. The compromise gives everyone achievements. Everyone has something to lose. For politicians, Moshe Nissim did something good, but you can't have a compromise. That's why it's not relevant. We're not mature enough for a compromise. Looking at it simplistically, it's perfect. You took the impossible and you made out of it something reasonable, but it's not relevant. But don't make that some tweet. Let me conclude with that, ladies and gentlemen. This is not the time to hear from the audience. Let's wait. We will have time for Q&A, but right now is not the time. We need you at the Knesset. They won't listen to me. Yes, they would. What we need to do is to manufacture the method. Without a method, we are at the mercy of faulty compromises. This is exactly what happens. You use the word monopoly, but we don't have a method. That's why conferences like this one are so important. Politicians don't know how to manufacture a method. It's too complex for them, especially on this kind of issue. We need rabbis, intellectuals, we need an engaged public in order to manufacture a method. And then we'll be able to come up with the working possibility. Let's take kashrut as an example. We started that by saying it's not a Halakhic issue at all. It's not a religious issue at all. And we established private hashgacha for kashrut. Shas demanded a bill doing away with that kind of hashgacha. I, as a member of Knesset, looked into legislation for establishing private hashgacha. It was not possible. Now we do have a way of enabling its existence. Maybe we'll be able to have a law in future. A member of Knesset has to do his or her work on a religious, moral, political level. It's a bit of an illusion. I feel myself extremely connected, but ultimately you can't do anything political without a base. This is why the conference that we're holding today is so important. Thank you. And I'm sorry that I have to leave. We're also sorry that you have to go back to the Knesset. Let me please call upon Rabbi Professor Golinkin again. He'll start from the beginning and he'll speak for 15 minutes.
I want to talk about four things. First of all, about the tension between Israel and the diaspora, meaning Bavel during the Talmudic period, the tension between the unity of the Jewish people and the unity of opinions or lack of unity. Third is the issue of conversion. And four is a solution that I think is different than the solution that the MK presented. First of all, this is nothing new, and the paper by Rabbi Lieberman about the relationship between Jews of Israel and Babylon was entitled "That's the way it was, and that's the way it will be." If we look at the Talmud, the Talmud Bavli and the Talmud Yerushalmi, as he and Professor Schwartz did, you discover that over 1,000 years ago, over 2,000 years ago, there was a lot of tension between the Jewry of Israel and Jewry of Babylon. For example, in Yoma, Resh Lakish swam in the Jordan, and Rabbi Bar Chama gave him a hand and said, "I hate you." Resh Lakish said he hates the Babylonians because it says if it's a stone, we'll build a mountain on it. If you go ahead, if you force forward during Ezra's time, you were like silver. Now you are like the wood that is controlled by others. He's criticizing the Babylonian diaspora that came to Israel as individuals and not as a community. When he sees the Babylonians in the market of Tzipori, he would say, "Disperse yourselves. When you came to Israel, you didn't come as a wall, but now you're forming a wall. You came as individuals, and here you're gathering as a group. In other words, go home." Rabbi Yasaf in Brachot, Yerushalmi, said when he went to the land of Israel, he went to get a haircut, he went to swim in the bathhouse in Tiberias, and he met a clown who who smacked him because he was a Babylonian. Hillel came to Israel, and he's walking down the street. He meets a group of people, Avot Rabbi Natan, he's called a stupid Babylonian. On the other hand, the sages of Babylon tried to improve to make their Jewry equivalent to Jewry of Israel. Professor Gafni and others taught this subject. They claimed that the head of the diaspora was. They claimed that God's presence is in the synagogue that was established in Babylonia, and that the destruction of the first temple were taken there in order to build a synagogue about burial. Burial in Israel is, of course, the best. They said that the ksherim, those who are the best of Israel, are adapted in Babylon and in Babylonia, and vice versa. And anyone who lives in Babylonia, it's as if they live in the land of Israel, and anyone who does the opposite, who comes to Israel, is violating a commandment, meaning that the tension that exists between the two large centers of Judaism existed then and exists now. It's nothing new. About an hour and a half, I talked about the unity of the Jewish people. I will not repeat my sources, but I will add one source that I like very much. There is a practice in the world that people grab a group of sticks. They cannot break them together, but if you take one stick, then even a baby can break it easily. And therefore, you find that the Jews are strong when they are together. If you take 12 sticks, each stick can easily be broken separately, but if you put them together, you can't break them together. That's the way the people of Israel are. If we are united, then we will be redeemed. And that corresponds with the other sources that I brought about unity an hour and a half ago. Does that mean that these sages expected us to agree on everything? Of course not. They believed in pluralism in Torah, pluralism in humanity, and in Halacha. In the Torah, how? There are 70 faces or aspects of the Torah, as it says in Midbar Rabbah, meaning that just as a hammer can break a stone, the stone shatters into many different pieces. The same way, a verse can be explained in different ways. Another saying is that if you see the people of Israel, you praise them for how their opinions differ from one another, just as their faces differ from one another. We say a blessing on that no one looks alike and no one agrees with each other. We bless pluralism. Third, pluralism in Halakha. We learned from the Yerushalmi that if the Torah was given in pieces with divided rulings, then it would not be able to stand. Moshe said, teach me halakha. He wanted the life to be easier. He asked God to please tell me what the law is. And God says, the majority will determine. If the majority rules in favor, then it is in favor. If they are against, then it is against. There are endless, it is in their hands. So on the one hand, there is an ideal of unity among the Jewish people. And on the other hand, there is an ideal of pluralism in the Torah, in humanity, and in halakha. And let's move on to conversion and see what happens today with this issue, with the issue of pluralism in halakha when it comes to conversion. As you know, the Chief Rabbinate of Israel is an ultra-Orthodox institute, and with regard to conversion, they create two types of problems. On the one hand, they take the most extreme approach to converts accepting the rules of Judaism, and they're also very strict about who is allowed to convert. First of all, there's no doubt that the most popular opinion in halakha over the last 1,500 years is that when a person converts, we teach them a little bit about the commandments. We teach them the rewards and the punishments, etc. The course on conversion that's described in Yevamot is about half an hour, maybe an hour. You teach them about the large mitzvot, the smaller mitzvot, if the convert accepts these commandments, then you do the formal formal ceremonies, brit milah and mikveh, if it's a woman, just mikveh. This was the ruling quoted almost word for word by the Rambam and by Rabbi Yosef Karo. This is the normative halacha, a very lenient approach to conversion. Where does the strict approach come from? It comes from another source that says that if you want to accept, if they accept everything other than one thing, then you do not accept them. Idol worshippers who accept the words of the Torah other than one aspect, we do not accept him as a convert, even if it is a slight condition of commentary, meaning that if the Gentile accepts everything other than one aspect, he will not be accepted as a convert. Another opinion is that even if a commentary is not accepted, for example, if the convert says that he is willing to accept all of the commandments, whether for the oral Torah, the written Torah, but the convert says, I will light the Shabbat candles 7 minutes before sunset instead of 18, he will not be accepted as a convert. It's interesting that this opinion was not ruled as halacha by any commentator for 1800 years. No one ruled that way until the ultra-Orthodox rabbis came at the end of the 19th century and began to rule specifically according to Bechorot and not according to Yevamot, taking the more stricter approach, and that is the approach of the chief rabbinate and the ultra-Orthodox world today, meaning that the converts have to accept all of the mitzvot and to keep them. That is the first. The second problem is that over the last years they have been very restricting about which rabbis can convert into Judaism. Until over the last years they didn't accept conservative and reform conversions, and now they do not even accept the conversions of other leading Orthodox rabbis around the world. They signed an agreement with the RCA that there are only 15 rabbinical courts that are accepted by the Israeli rabbinate in the United States, and only several dozen rabbis that are accepted, meaning that the vast majority of Orthodox rabbis in the United States can do conversion according to halakha. Their conversion is not recognized by the state of Israel. So this is an extremely strict approach, first of all about the halachic approach to conversion, and secondly about the administrative approach to conversion. We will only convert those who take upon themselves all of the mitzvot, and we will also restrict those that are allowed to convert to a very small group. Their goal is clear. They do not want to convert anyone. And some of the ultra-Orthodox rabbis even say that specifically. So here we have a problem here that the official stance of the chief rabbinate is very strict in an unprecedented way in Halakhic history. And second, they limited those who are allowed to convert within the Jewish world. So the question is, what is the solution? How can we bridge these gaps? Of course, the simple solution is to cancel the chief rabbinate. I tried not to smile, but I was not successful. I published an article about that in the Jerusalem Report in November 2013. You can read the article. It's called "Abolish the Chief Rabbinate," or whatever they called the article. They gave it a different title than I did. Today I want to propose something else because I don't think we will be able to abolish the chief rabbinate. What I want to propose is to return to the community model that worked over the last 2,000 years. And it's very interesting that the community model existed during the time of the Talmud as well, when we lived in the land of Israel, meaning that it's not a model that was introduced in exile, it existed in the land of Israel. So first of all, I'll start by proving that this model existed throughout the generations.
Okay.
We know that during the time of the Talmud in the land of Israel, there were Babylonian synagogues in the land of Israel. There was a very famous synagogue in Tzipori during the time of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, during the time of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chia bar Abba. In Tiberias, there was also a synagogue of people from Babylonia, and in Jerusalem, there was a synagogue of Alexandrians. Do you think that in those synagogues they followed the customs of the land of Israel? There is no way. There is no doubt that in those synagogues they practiced their own customs. Professor Avram Goldberg published an article in 1978 where he proved that Rabbi Zera, the most enthusiastic Zionist in the Babylonian and Yerushalmi Talmud, continued to follow the Babylonian customs, and he gave example after example. This Zionist moved to Israel. He was willing to swim through the Jordan River to reach the land of Israel. And what does he do when he reaches the land of Israel? He continues to follow Babylonian customs. We know that there were distinctions between different areas in Israel. There were there were customs in Tiberias, there were customs in Tzipori. We know that there were disagreements between Judea and the Galilee. We know that there are verses in the Talmud that says that in certain areas the custom was so and so. In Rabbi Yossi Haglili's community, they ate chicken with milk. In his location, they followed the ruling of Rabbi Yossi Haglili, which was opposed to all of the other sages. That was his opinion. And in his community, they followed the ruling of that sage. This continues through the period of the Gaonim, when there was a Babylonian synagogue in Ramle, in Tiberias, and in Dan. You didn't know that Banyas was called the Dan Fortress during the Middle Ages. In Cairo, there was a synagogue of Jews from the land of Israel and of Babylonian Jews. They finished the Torah in 3.5 years. In the other synagogue, they've completed the Torah cycle once a year, but they still celebrated together. In Algeria, there were the synagogue of Spanish Jews and Mallorca Jews who were expelled from Spain beforehand, and then I reached the Achronim stage, the last stages. Rabbi Yosef Karo rules that the Ashkenazim that came to Turkey, and the subject was something related to slaughtering, the Ashkenazim that came to Turkey have to follow the customs of Turkey and not follow the customs of their places of origin. Do you think that's what happened? Forget about it. There's no chance. What Rabbi Tzimel says in his book about Ashkenazim and Sfardim, he writes, we know that these were never applied. New communities were in Gaonic and times in Palestinian, Syria, and Egypt at the end of the 14th and beginning of the 15th centuries in South Africa and North Africa, in following centuries in European countries and other parts of the world, meaning everywhere that there were new Jewish communities in those regions, they established their own Beit Din, their own court, their own synagogue, and they followed their own customs. That was the practice in Verona and Venezia and London and in many other places, and they acted. Their rules of slaughtering were different. They have different rules related to marital issues and other halachic issues. So I would like to summarize, but to conclude by saying that I once thought that we have to reach agreements or compromises on conversion, because after 1,900 years we have reunited in the state of Israel, and we have to find a compromise so that we can all convert in the same way, and in all other areas, that we have to be able to compromise in all areas. But I think that is clear after 70 years of the state's existence that we will not be able to reach a compromise on these issues. There are too many different halachic approaches. Therefore, the ideal solution is to return to the community pluralistic model that existed from Talmudic times until today. As you can see in the booklet, in the table in the booklet that was published by Dr. Breakstone and I hope that you'll read this booklet on conversion. There are already 5 different courts for conversion in Israel. There's the rabbinical one, there's the ultra-Orthodox courts, there's Giur Kahalacha, modern Orthodox, there's the conservative court, and there's the Reform conversion court. This pluralism in conversion courts is not unusual. It's nothing new. This is what we've always done. This is part of Jewish history of pluralistic community Judaism. So I don't think that we have to reinvent the wheel. The state of Israel has to acknowledge reality and acknowledge the different communities and accept their conversions. Thank you.
That was hard. Okay, it's on. It's on. Thank you, Professor Golinkin. Rabbi Benny Lau is our next speaker. I wanted to be a nice guy, but after hearing everybody here, I don't feel like it anymore. I feel like being mean. I'll see what I can do. Let me devote a few minutes to being, I might be my grandfather, your grandfather, everybody's grandfather, people who were here before I was born, before the state of Israel existed. President Doron Bar mentioned his great-grandfather who came here in 1837. I heard him at the beginning of the first session. I want to pose this question to his great-great-grandfather. What synagogue did he pray in? When you talk about abolishing the rabbinate, in 1977 here in Israel, there was a sea change here in Israel. After many, many years of the Labour Party rule, Begin came to power with the Likud. One of the leaders of the labor movement, a symbolic figure, was extremely angry and said, the people is wrong. The people are wrong. We have to change the people. That's exactly the same thing. We don't mean to hold a seminar with all due respect on the question, does the Talmud show Halakhic development? We all know that already. We were brought up on that principle. We don't have to prove a dynamic on the part of the rabbis. We don't have to say that the rabbis are wrong and we know Gemara better than them. It's absurd to speak in the name of pluralism, to say that they're wrong and we're right. That's not pluralism. That's religious zealotry. If the question is, can we bridge the gaps between Israel and American Jews, that's not building bridges, that's burning bridges. If you say they're wrong, they're zealots, they're wrong, we're enlightened, we're pluralistic, we're the nice guys, fine, good luck. But we'll never build bridges that way. There are certain rules when we deliberate all these issues of cultural encounters in the time of the Talmud, in the time of the Rishonim, the Achronim. There's always a single code that is a constant. This constant is derech eretz, culture, a civilized way of talking. When you come to a place, you're a visitor. It takes a long time till you become one of them. Becoming one of us is a conduct code. If you know about kibbutzim, you know what it's like. Let me tell you a first-hand experience. I was married to a member of a kibbutz. My status was the wife of a member. And finally, I became a member of the kibbutz. And I was asked to establish the first committee at Kibbutz Sa'ad, committee to deal with changes in the structure of the kibbutz. This was a long time ago, in the late 80s, an important committee that had to talk about work and how much, what salary. This was a big chidush at the time, to try to build up an index between the work a member of a kibbutz does and the salary, the money he gets. A veteran kibbutz member came to me, Yaakov Gadish, the late Yaakov Gadish, demanded that I leave the committee. He said that I wasn't a member of kibbutz. He said, you need to be a member of the religious kibbutzi movement. You're not a member. You just became a member of this kibbutz. You're not one of us yet. This was something that he felt very deeply and emotionally. He said this with the greatest emotion. When we look at the Kotel, long before the State of Israel was established, when the Reform movement left the land of Israel, when the Reform movement deleted Jerusalem from its prayer books, from its prayers, it rejected this identity. It wanted religion without a nation. There were Sephardi Jews, Ashkenazi Jews. They had different minyanim of prayer at the Kotel. The Kotel was never a place that Jews left as long as they could remain there. In 1948 till 1967, Jews were forced to abandon the Kotel. But this zealotry, this extreme approach, we never left the Kotel. Whenever you came there at any time of day, the Vatikim at midnight, no matter when you came to the Kotel, there was always praying going on there. Then all of a sudden, visitors come, and these visitors want to change the way prayer is conducted at the Kotel. For hundreds of years, there was a dynamic of prayer at the Kotel. The Haredi, ultra-Orthodox Jews, all its stripes, and the non-Haredi Jews, they all had their ways of prayer, their customs. Now the visitors say, we want different types of synagogues, the way they had in the Galilee and Judah. We want the same thing at the Kotel, because the Kotel belongs to the people of Israel. But there's a tradition, if there's a tradition in a specific place, tradition lasting over such a long period of time, tradition guarding the custom of the site, how can you change it just like that? Are we members or are we visitors? Can I treat the Kotel the way I treat my own home? Shouldn't we be civilized, derech eretz, before the Torah? Let's feel the pain of those custodians of the Kotel. I'm not talking about Temple Mount, I'm talking about the Kotel. If we're really pluralistic, if we're truly such good people, shouldn't we listen to the pain of these people, the real pain? These people are witnessing the destruction because of the defilement in their eyes. Shouldn't we at least understand them? We should try. I see I'm getting you angry. Very good. Let's hear you. Fine. Yes, secular Jews freed the Kotel. Do you want the bridge or do you want to burn the bridge? If you want to grapple and do a hand wrestle, I'll tell you why we need to kick the Haredi Jews out of the Kotel. They don't go to the army. Let's just stone them. Is that what we want? Do we want to say how terrible the Haredi Jews are, why they're destroying Judaism, they're not continuing the tradition of Talmudic times? Is that what we have to say in the name of trying to build something new and creative? I can tell you I'm closer to you than to the Haredi Jews, but if you do that, you can try to abolish the rabbinate 1,000 times over, you'll never succeed. The Sephardi and Ashkenazi traditional Jewry here in Israel
קראת לזה תיאוקרטי. לשם הולכת הפרשנות. התפיסה אומרת, אתם באמריקה תעשו מה שטוב לכם באמריקה. תתבוללו, תעשו את כל השטויות שאתם מאמינים בהם של נישואי תערובת, תעשו הכל. תמציאו סטטוס חדש שנקרא ג'וי, תעשו מה שאתם רוצים. אל תיגעו במדינת ישראל. ככל שהיהדות הליברלית תשמיע יותר קולות של אנטי, קולות של, אני נזהר מלומר, שנאה כלפי היהדות הדתית, היהדות הדתית תגביה את החומה עוד ועוד ועוד. ככה לא בונים קשרים. עד כאן אני מייצג את הכאב הגדול, את הפחד הגדול, את האימה, חרדה, שמובילה, כמו שידוע לכם, לשנאה גדולה. משנאה לא בונים קשרים. היום היהדות הישראלית, המסורתית והדתית, לא מכירה את היהדות הליברלית, לא רוצה להכיר את היהדות הליברלית. יש איים של יהדות ליברלית, קטנים, נחמדים, אבל בסוף, כשאתה מסתכל בתמונה הגדולה, תמונה הגדולה של בתי הכנסת, תמונה הגדולה של מוסדות הדת, תמונה הגדולה של מערכת החינוך, תמונה הגדולה של לימודי היהדות. כשאתה מסתכל בתמונה הגדולה, היהדות הליברלית לא מצאה אחיזה בישראל. ואי אפשר לעשות את זה באופן מלאכותי. אי אפשר לייצר איזו תנועה של נתעורר בוקר אחד והאור הגדול של הליברליות יתפשט על מדינת ישראל החשוכה. זה לא יקרה. הדרך היחידה עוד דקה. נתת לי 2, קיבלת 1. הדרך היחידה היא דרך של להיות. אני אומר פה אמירה לא קלה. ככל שאנשים יהיו בתוך מערכות החיים, יהיו במובן של הוויה, לא במובן של המאבק, אלא במובן של ההוויה, יהיו במקומות עצמם, יהיו בצומתי החיים של מערכות החינוך, של מערכות הפעילות החברתית והדתית. לא ישגרו את המאמרים, אלא ישגרו את הילדים. ככל שההוויה הישראלית תהיה מלאה באנשים שמאמינים בערכים של ליברליות, אז לאט לאט האור הזה יכול להתפשט. אני כן מודאג. אני מודאג כי אני שומע את המאמרים ואני לא רואה את הנוכחות מספיק. והנוכחות הזאת רק היא של עין בעין יראו, גם בשוב השם ציון, וכשאנשים עם אמונה בערכים של יהדות, שהיא גם מתחדשת, והיא גם מאירה, והיא גם משלבת, כשיהודים כאלה יהיו בהוויה, יהיו כאן, ההשפעה שלהם אמורה להיות הרבה יותר דומיננטית. סליחה על התוקפנות.
אוקיי, מיועד לרב בני, אם יענו גם כן. אבל הרב בני, אתה עצמך דוגל
בחייך במסגרת
הזאת.
Outside of this framework, you work on finding ways of reaching out to the rest, to the general community. You might have heard of 929. There are programs that you promote, and you show that there are ways of bridging the gaps between populations in Israel and abroad. Maybe you can address that issue, and we'd like to hear from the others as well. Please give the speaker a microphone. Ask the speaker to move closer to the microphone.
I
believe that there has to be room for everyone. If you ask me personally, if they were smart, they would allow the women on Rosh Chodesh, they would give them 2 hours to daven. It wouldn't be an issue. It would be very simple. It's a conflict that is not for genuine purposes. It's all politics. Of course, the solutions are easier. The fire is always worse. But when I do what I do, I try. I'm not always successful, and when I fail, it's terrible. I try not to blacken the face of those who think the opposite of what I think. There are many people who disagree with the 929 project on both sides. I try, even today, not to say a word about these people. They have their approach. I have my approach. And the ability to operate in different ways, I have to exist. My approach is to be present, to be in the rabbinate, to be in the synagogue, to be in Tel Aviv, to be part of the renewed Torah learning in Tel Aviv. I know that if I'm not in Tel Aviv in the renewed Torah renewal, I know that my voice will not be heard. If I'm not in the synagogue, then my Torah will not be heard there. I know that when I'm there, I am limited. I'm limited because there are walls, there are institutes, there are customs, there are lifestyles, and I adapt to the place where I am located. But I know that I am not alone. There are other ways that are not me. The ability to understand that I don't exist alone. My way, my ultra-Orthodox cousin in the chief rabbinate does everything. He gives his life for the people of Israel. He does things that I disagree with. But if you ask him inside, face to face, if you ask him what he believes in, he believes that he is serving the Jewish people for now and for future generations. That is his shlichut, that is his mission. We can believe, and we can believe that he believes. I was asked to respond to what Rabbi Benny said. I thank you for the opportunity. I want to say, first of all, that I'm very glad that Rabbi Lau confirms my main point, which is that halakha develops over time. You said yourself, you confirmed that point yourself, and you also said that there is no need even to say that this tendency appears as a central concept in the Babylonian Talmud. So I'm very glad that we both have bridged the gap that may have existed beforehand between us. Now, the second thing is that it is possible that you and I understand, or we define differently, the concept of derech eretz. In my opinion, if you do not agree with what you said, if you think that the fact that I was invited here to say what I had to say, and David Golinkin also said similar things in a different way, but similar things. If you don't agree with what I said, then you could have addressed the things that I said themselves and not to attack me personally. In my opinion, you attacked me personally, and to me that is not derech eretz. If you want to say that I don't understand the Gemara correctly, or that the chief rabbinate deserves the opportunity to do what it does, that's okay. I'm willing to discuss that. I'm willing you to hear that I am wrong, but I am not willing, as an invited guest to this conference, to hear from you, to hear a personal attack from you, and that is what I think I heard from you. That's what I wanted to say. As the moderator of this session, I want to say that I am sure that this was not a personal attack. David, would you like to respond? Rabbi Lau and me and myself have known each other for many years. We met when we participated in a debate I think that there are 2 points that I wanted to say in response to what you said. First of all, the issue of a guest being a member of the household, like in different families, like in Professor Doron's house, I am a guest, but the conservative movement have been in Israel for 40 years. Schechter and Tali have existed for over 40 years. I don't think that someone who has been here 40 out of 70 years is a guest. I think that they are a member of the household. And I think that since there are tens of thousands of Israelis who are involved in our activities throughout Israel, I think we deserve the respect of a member of the household and the ability to contribute and to change. And it certainly is insulting to hear, for the Jews of the diaspora, to hear that we are not members of the household. That's one point. The second thing is that I intentionally didn't talk about the Kotel because I don't think that this is a Halakhic issue. I think that we can call it a technical issue. I think that Zera Hess and Natan Sharansky and this distinguished group reached an excellent compromise on the Kotel, as it says in Baba Metzia. They will split it. There's the Kotel for the Orthodox, the Kotel for the non-Orthodox. Then there's no dispute, and everyone can act according to their own customs. The problem is that the Israeli government canceled the Kotel outline. So I think that most of the people in this room, and probably most of the Jews that are part of the conservative movement, are willing to accept compromise. What I proposed in my speech was a compromise. I think that in an ideal world, we need a state with one type of conversion and one kashrut body, but it doesn't work. And therefore, we have to develop a different framework. And the framework that I am proposing is the community framework, in which there are different groups, different communities. Each has its own court, its own kashrut system, its own conversion system. That's how we lived for 2,000 years in exile. That's how we lived in the land of Israel 2,000 years ago. It's not terrible. It might not be the ideal that Rachel Azaria talked about unifying all the drops of oil, but if there is a precedent of Jewish communities who lived alongside one another and thrived, then we can adopt that model. So instead of Eged or Solel Boneh, maybe it's not true that one size fits all, then we have to find alternatives.
Would Rabbi Benny like to respond? If so, he can have the opportunity now, but they won't respond again after that. Well, if you give me the opportunity, of course. The concept of machloket appears in our sources. The concept of disagreement is more like conflict. Take Bava Batra, for example, when partners want to build a wall, a divide down the middle, that's a divide. A good fence makes for good neighbors, but that's not a bridge. That's accepting the fact that we're not a family any longer. You can't have a dividing wall within a home. You can only have walls and fences between houses. We have to say that right out loud. I hear what Professor Golinkin, Rabbi Golinkin is saying. He's saying it just doesn't work. We failed. So let's separate. You said, let them divide the wall. You be on this side, I'll be on that side, an Orthodox Kotel, the mixed Kotel. That solution is very practical. I can even appreciate it, but the pain is terrible. It's so painful because we have no family left. Once we say that, and I'll tell you why. Just a second.
ברגע שאמרנו שאנחנו חיים
The
במתחמים
moment we
שונים,
recognize that we have
יש
to
לך
live
מתחם שלך
separately,
ולי
you have
מתחם
your
שלי,
compound, your
אנחנו
area, and I have
בהגדרה
my area,
מייחסים
my
את עצמנו
designated area,
למקומות
and
שונים.
yours, we belong to
צריך פה,
different
אני
places. We're not at the
ביקשתי
same
משרנסקי, עוד מעט
place.
יבוא, אבל
I asked
כחלק
Sharansky, he'll be
מהפתרון
here in a
אמרתי
minute,
לו,
as part of the
לפחות,
solution I
אתם תצחקו,
proposed,
אבל אל תצחקו.
you'll laugh, but
שהבידוק
don't laugh,
הביטחוני
that the security
בכניסה
check at the
לכותל,
entrance to the
לכל
Kotel,
הרחבה,
to the
יהיה
entire
משותף.
area,
זאת אומרת, שאתה שואל בן
should
אדם,
be
לפני
in
שהוא
one
בבודקה
place. In
של
other words,
הבידוק,
ask someone before
ולאן
they
אתה הולך
undergo
לכותל?
security check.
הוא עבר את הבידוק,
Ask someone before
הוא
they
כבר
undergo
בכותל.
security check.
ואז
Ask them where
שילך
they're
לגן
going.
הארכיאולוגי בצד
He
אחד,
says the
שילך
Kotel.
בצד
Once he's
שמאל,
past that
אבל
point, he's
אנחנו
at the
ביחד
Kotel.
נכנסים
Then he
לכותל.
can go to the
אומר,
archaeological
לפחות שהכניסה
park
תהיה משותפת,
or the
כדי
other
שלא נאבד
side.
את
But you
הבית
walk into the
המשותף.
same Kotel, the same
ולא
area. At least have the
איבדנו מזמן.
security
מי שאומר
check
איבדנו מזמן,
as
אני
the one
מכבד,
place
אבל לא
where
מסכים.
everyone is together. We have a home for all of us. I can't
אז,
agree with your proposal. I respect it, but I don't agree.
עכשיו רק משפט
That's
אחרון
amazing.
לפרופסור
Now
יהודית.
just
אני קודם כל
one
מבקש סליחה,
last word to Professor Judith
ההסכמות
Hauptman.
שאת אומרת
I
על
apologize.
התפתחות ההלכה,
You
ועל
said we
כל
agree
המעשה
on the
התלמודי
development of
שמוכיח את-
halacha and the
זה
Talmudic
לחם
story.
חוקנו בבתי המדרש
We study that at
האורתודוקסיים
Orthodox
בישראל. זה- עכשיו, שנייה,
yeshivot
אני אומר,
and
זה פשוט
bet
מה
midrash
שנקרא
here in Israel.
בשפה התלמודית כבועה בקותחה. זה
We
הכי
do
פשוט
that
בעולם.
day in, day out.
אבל
It's obvious. We
בכל
accept
הדינמיקה
that.
של ההלכה,
But in the
שפוסקי
dynamic of
הלכה
halacha,
עמדו
when
מול
the
מציאות
decisors
שהם
were
חשבו
faced
או
with
הרגישו,
reality,
חשדו,
where
שיש
they
פה משהו
thought there
שהולך
would be
למקום של
something
נגד, איבדו את
controversial,
האמון, פתאום יש קיר
when there was
חוסם.
no
שם
trust,
נעצרה
there was a
ההלכה.
wall.
ואני
That's
אומר
where
את זה, לא
halacha
מצחיק.
stops,
אפשר להראות את
stops
זה
short.
בפסקים של החתם
You
סופר.
can look
אפשר
and
להראות
find
את
that
זה
in the
לכל
Chatam
אורך
Sofer
הדרך.
in his
שלום לנתן
psika.
שרנסקי.
Natan Sharansky just joined us.
אני
Shalom,
אומר את
Natan.
זה, כדאי לגעת בדבר עצמו.
Let's
הדבר
touch the
עצמו
thing
זה
itself.
שיש
The thing
אמון,
itself is when you
אז
have
רוצים
trust,
לפעול בדינמיקה
you
של
want
הפתרון.
a dynamic of
כשמאבדים את
solution. When you
האמון,
lose
אז או
trust,
שאומרים גם לי גם לך
you
לא
say,
יהיה ושורפים את המועדון,
I don't want you
נכון?
to have
משפט
anything
שהוא
if
גם
I
לי
can't
גם
have
לך לא
it.
יהיה.
If you
או
can't have it, I don't
שאומרים,
want it either.
יחלוקו במובן הזה של חוסר אמון,
Or you
אז אתה תהיה
decide to
בשלך ואני
separate
בשלי.
and
ואני
divide.
מרשה
I
לעצמי,
take my
לכבוד,
part, you take
אנחנו
my
חוגגים
part,
פה
we're
גם
separate,
70
and
שנה,
never
וגם
the twain shall
מותר
meet.
לחלום
We can
שאנחנו
dream
נצליח
of
לייצר בית
succeeding
של
to build a
משפחה.
home.
חלום.
It's a dream for all of us. I'd like to thank the members of the panel. Our time is up. It's 5 minutes before we have to stop, but we do have to stop now. There's a change in our program. We have the honor of welcoming Natan Sharansky. Israel Prize recipient 2018. Natan Sharansky was supposed to be with us for the last session, but due to change in his schedule, he came now. Let me thank him, first of all, for his leadership of the Jewish Agency for so many years, all the work he's done and continues to do for the Jewish people, including the fact that the Jewish Agency funds all the streams in modern Judaism. And I also want to thank him for the effort he put into the Kotel plan, and I do hope that eventually we will be able to implement that plan. Without further ado, I give you Natan Sharansky. Natan, please stay because we have something to give you at the end of your remarks. I hope it's not expensive because the legal counsel will have to be privy to that decision. Good evening. I do apologize. There are various constraints and I won't be able to be here later. I'm glad I had the opportunity to join you now and address you briefly. I was awarded membership in the movement, so I have to meet your standards. I'd like to begin by saying I don't have good news here tonight. There have been some dramatic developments with Iran. If everything remains quiet, we are facing another crisis, another period of crisis. I think there'll be another effort to pass a law on conversion, and the Who's a Jew crises from 1987, 2010, the 90s. Will there be a law? Will they pass the law or not? Halakhic conversion. That's a struggle that we're still undergoing here in Israel. The proposals, as I understand them today, are pointing in the direction of a renewed effort to pass a law on conversion that gives Orthodox conversion the monopoly here in Israel. We have a lot of experience on this. In recent years, we've done a lot working with many members of Knesset. We brought them to see U.S. communities, Jewish communities. As a result, I think many members of Knesset understand now the responsibility of the State of Israel to be a home to every Jew anywhere in the world. I wanted to be quite clear. Personally, I go to an Orthodox synagogue. That's where I pray. But I'll never forget, the State of Israel belongs to the entire Jewish people. It's extremely important for every Jewish person to feel at home here, to feel comfortable here in Israel. Every Jew can realize his or her Judaism however he or she is used to. That's why the Jewish Agency is putting up a fight so that the Kotel will provide a comfortable place for every Jew to pray in his or her, according to his or her custom. Conversion is a much more complex issue than the Kotel. The Kotel, despite the circumstances and the qualifications and the reservations on the part of the government, I think that in the end we will. It will take time, but in the end I think we will reach an agreement such as we had with the three important elements. First of all, a physical space. The government gave in to pressure. It's beginning to do that. In a few months, they're promising that it will happen. I don't think it will take just a few months, but in a year and a half, if we persist, we'll have that solution. The second point is that one point of entry, the common entrance. Right now, it doesn't seem possible. And the third point is that whoever prays there will run the place and manage it, and not politicians who are here today, gone tomorrow. The struggle continues. I do believe that there'll be a solution. There isn't a real conflict here between halakha and reality. I think we can solve that problem. Conversion is a much, much more complicated matter, especially since here in the State of Israel, there is a real need for conversion. A more lenient conversion, going according to Beit Hillel, not Beit Shammai, to deal with the hundreds of thousands of people who are not halachically Jewish, but the law of return recognizes them. We have to offer them conversion that the state recognizes. How can we give them conversion that is accepted by everybody, but is also more liberal than what the rabbinate demands today? This is a thorny problem. The Naaman Committee, Naaman Commission, and all the other commissions dealt with that. We said this should not be at the expense of the legitimate status of other types of conversion. If you want more liberal conversion, let us pass our law that enables more liberal conversion. But the law will state that only Orthodox conversion is valid. And I say no, though it's complicated. I don't want to say no because we truly want liberalization of conversion vis-a-vis the Orthodox conversion. But at the same time, it is not possible for us to inflict harm to such a large population here in Israel and its ties with Israel. We're moving towards a new stage of the struggle, and this is what I want to say about it. People always say, well, we have struggles because politicians are not... Politicians work with short-term political aims. This is the nature of politicians. I was part of Israeli politics for 9 years. I was 9 years in prison, 9 years in Israeli politics, 9 years at the Jewish Agency, so I can certainly say that I know what I'm talking about. There's no other way. Politicians will always do whatever is good for the polls, for getting votes. When I was a new minister in 1996, Yulia Edelstein and I, after the election, we were voted in. Yulia Edelstein sat next to me. We spoke in Russian when we didn't want anyone to understand. And Ariel Sharon sat on my other side, and he said, take into account, I understand Russian, and he was right. And he decided to assume responsibility for us and be our mentor, help us ease our way into politics, the Natan Commission, who's a Jew. I was a leader of that struggle, and he said to me, look, Natan, I love Jews no matter where. In fact, I love Jews more than you do, because you say you talk about conservatives and reform Jews, and you say they're Jews just as much as we are. I don't care if they go to any synagogue. If he's a good soldier, he's a Jew as far as I'm concerned. That's what he said, Ariel Sharon. That's why I love Jews. But I want you to succeed. I very much want that. In order to succeed, you need to deliver the goods to your constituents. Reform Jews and conservative Jews don't live here, so they don't vote for you. Your voters come from the former Soviet Union. What you did now is a very important thing. This whole agreement on national conversion plan for new immigrants. Yulia Edelstein and I started a whole system of conversion. I couldn't do that without the Minister of Housing, without Mayor Porush, without the cooperation. I couldn't do that. And now you're going to lose Mayor Porush's support, because you're fighting for Jewish interests. They are Jewish interests, but they're American Jewish interests. You won't be able to continue with your reforms in housing. He said, look, it's very simple, and Ben Gurion said it. That's what Sharon told me. Once they come here, hundreds of thousands and millions, and they live here, you'll be able to do things for them. I thought he was being cynical. A politician acts in that way. Today, even though we recognize that Israel is responsible for Jews all over the world and human rights make it important for us to ensure the rights of Jews all over the world. Today, that view is much more popular and accepted. But even today, the government can decide to do something about the Kotel, and a year later, so easily, to overturn its decision. And I was there, I saw how easy it is to overturn with a majority in the parliament, to overturn a decision, their own decision. Why? Because they knew that it's not an important issue for their constituency. Politicians are cynical. I have to say that the Haredi politicians, they do exactly what they promised their voters. They say the exact same thing before elections and after elections. They say, we can shout about it, we can get angry at them. We can get angry when they say that Reform Jews are not Jewish, and it's true, that's a disgrace. But he said the same thing before elections and after elections. At least they're honest. Our problem is, I always say this, Labor, Likud, and other parties, they don't say these things. But in the end, they think what is the best thing to do that will get them the most votes. As long as most Israelis don't consider this such an important issue, nothing will change. We won't be able to change it on the political level here. If we do succeed somehow, we stopped right now with the conversion law, and now there's a monopoly. If that's what happened, prime ministers don't do what we want. But in the end, they understand that we have to prevent a rift between Jews here in Israel and Jews who don't live here in Israel. And right now there's a huge struggle, and we're using at the Jewish Agency the shlichim. We have 7,000 shlichim who lived overseas. They're familiar with Jewish communities abroad. They know what it means to choose to be a Jew. They know what the principle of mutual responsibility entails. They know that pluralism does not lead to assimilation. Quite the contrary, it's a way of preventing assimilation. That's a huge insight. Once you understand that, you can convince other people. We have 7,000 shlichim. We have partnerships between cities and communities. We have other tools. We're using all these tools to ensure that we can make inroads into the society here in Israel. And we have a good chance of winning more members of Knesset to our way of thinking, bringing them to Jewish communities overseas. Bringing them to a conservative community is easier than to a reform community. Members of Knesset there was a mistake when they were taken to a reform synagogue on Shabbat. Some of them said, you didn't even tell us that you were taking us to a concert. They don't even go to an Orthodox synagogue once a year, but for them it was a shock. I spoke to someone on the phone and I said, look, it's urgent, take them to a conservative shul. They went to a conservative synagogue and said, oh, after the Reform synagogue, this is normal, this is fine. Maybe that is a good way of operating, I don't know. I don't know if that's the right thing. We don't have enough experience, we don't have a method, but the point is, Israelis have all kinds of good things in their identity here in Israel, and I'm proud of being an Israeli when I'm overseas. But here in Israel, I'm no less proud of being a Jew who immigrated to Israel. Sometimes we're narrow-minded here in Israel, and we don't understand. Jews all over the world operate in different ways. They maintain their Judaism through all kinds of different ways, maintain their Judaism and maintain ties with Israel. We don't have any shortcuts. We'll have to continue with the struggle. The Ministry of Education, and they work with their minister, I assume. We want to introduce into the Israeli curriculum, into schools, the whole module of study about American Jewry and non-Orthodox streams and liberal Jewry. We'll try to do that together in order to change preconceptions here in Israeli society. If there's any chance of success, it's because every Jew, whether on the left, on the right, Orthodox, Haredi, secular, we all want Israel to be a home for all Jews. We want it. It doesn't necessarily mean we understand what it entails, but intuitively that's what we all want. Prime ministers, even when they are in some kind of conflict and confrontation, like with the Kotel, and I'm afraid we're headed that way again, if they see a way of preventing conflict, they'll prefer to prevent it. For that, we need public opinion to support us. There are no shortcuts here. We have a lot of work ahead of us. One final point, and I have to go. And I understand that you have dinner. It's terrible to separate you from your dinner. Let me just conclude by saying there are preconceptions, a very strong one, and I hear this in government all the time. They say to me, you're always asking us to give up our national interests and say, let's try to stop Iran. Why should we do this? For people who don't come make Aliyah to Israel, they don't send their children to Jewish schools. They're in American schools. Israel isn't important for them. We're talking about statistics among American Jews. And now you're asking us to give up our national interests. Why am I telling you this? I know what to say. I know how to answer them. People who made assimilation a new religion, and they tell us how good it is for Jews to assimilate. They made that their new religion, and I have to explain to them, and I explain to them over and over again, 85% of AIPAC is non-Orthodox Jews. Birthright, who comes to this program? It's non-Orthodox. They don't need it. If you want, despite everything, to keep these Jewish people Jewish, you need to maintain ties with them. It's easy to say, but ultimately, if people who come here for rights, for reform and conservative Judaism, if they're not for Aliyah, they have a lot less impact. The Zionist component of non-Orthodox movements, people who live here in Israel, they have a stronger voice now. Thank you.
We would like to conclude this session with a surprise. There are only two people who know about the surprise. I would like to invite Rabbi Dr. Mimi Feigelson to present Natan Sharansky with a gift that she's been waiting for 40 years to present. I stand here not as Rabbi Dr. Mimi. I'm standing here as a 19-year-old girl active in the Council for Soviet Jewry who writes letters writes letters to Anatoly Sharansky, and I send these letters over and over. I go to the post office. I pay for a pink receive slip. I always get a stamp, but never your stamp, never your signature. So I want to read 2 paragraphs from these letters, and finally, I want to give you a copy of all of the letters that I wrote. And at the end, I would like to ask you to sign a pink slip. It is possible anything can be changed from vision to reality. People who ended their exile in Siberia made everyone in Israel very happy. We hope that now the Russian authorities will allow her to leave and come to Israel. If Ida Mudel is no longer in exile, we hope that you too will soon be able to sit here with us in the land of Israel. Signed, Mimi. And the last letter that I wrote to you, I wrote as follows. Natan, I heard last week on the radio that the attitude towards the Russians towards you is getting worse, and that you are not even getting the letters that people write to you. Nevertheless, it is important that the Russians know that there are a lot of Israelis that are following or tracking what is happening with you, always and forever. From me, Mimi. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you very much for writing. Of course, I never received any of the letters of the tens of thousands that were written, but the KGB got them. And that was what was important, because I'm not sure that with my Hebrew I would have been able to understand what you wrote. Of course, the KGB couldn't understand the Hebrew, but what they did understand was that the Jewish people was watching out for me, and that's what was important. Thank you very much.